A recent landmark decision has affected the options that women have when male swimmers ruin their lives. I'm of course referring to the new restrictions on transgender women in sports. On June 19, FINA, the world governing body for swimming, essentially banned trans women from competing in the highest levels of international sports. It prohibits them from competing unless they began medical treatments to suppress production of testosterone before going through one of the early stages of puberty, or by age 12, whichever occurred later. This addresses the physical advantages that trans women get when they go through puberty and keep when they go through hormone therapy, as displayed by Michaela Phelps over there, aka Leah Thomas, the first openly transgender athlete to win an NCAA Division I national championship. People were watching the man cruise, break records, and overshadow the competition before Top Gun Maverick. Under FINA's new policy, Thomas is disqualified from competing as a woman at the 2024 Paris Olympics as he planned. FINA's rules apply only to international competitions, but could guide other sports federations that deal with this issue. Hopefully they adopt these rules too. That way a guy who struggles to win can't switch where he swims just because he walks with a switch. Another outspoken athlete was U.S. women's soccer team captain and professional victim Megan Rapinoe, who gave Time magazine an interview last week. I'm 100% supportive of trans inclusion. People do not know very much about it. We're missing almost everything. Missing almost everything, you mean her team's goals versus an under-15 boys soccer team? I know, it was a scrimmage and didn't count, but it's telling that the U.S. women's national team had to practice against teenagers because a men's pro team would have humiliated them further. And so much of this trans inclusion argument has been put through the extremely tiny lens of elite sports. Like, that is not the way that we need to be framing this question. We're talking about kids. We're talking about people's lives. We're talking about the entire state government coming down on one child in some states, 3 children in some states. They are committing suicide because they're being told that they're gross and different and evil and sinful and they can't play sports with their friends that they grew up with. Not to mention trying to take away health care. I think it's monstrous. Specifically, it's an imaginary monster in the closet. Nobody is offing themselves over sports, and nobody would come down on athletes if they just knew their place. Trans women are welcome to play alongside their peers, only if it's fair to do so. People should call out cheaters. Instead, trans female athletes get more props for playing the opposite gender than single moms on Father's Day. Show me the evidence that trans women are taking everyone's scholarships, are dominating in every sport, are winning every title. I'm sorry, it's just not happening. It is happening, just not in every sport, because they've only recently figured out that identifying as women is like using a Smurf account in an offline game. If we let everybody compete together, then the evidence would be overwhelming. Also, trans women don't have to win every single time for their advantages to be obvious. By the end of his swimming career at UPenn this year, Leah Thomas went from 65th on the men's team to 1st on the women's team in the 500-yard freestyle, and 554th on the men's team to 5th on the women's team in the 200-yard freestyle. If you can't beat them on a lower difficulty. So we need to start from inclusion, period. And as things arise, I have confidence that we can figure it out. But we can't start at the opposite. That is cruel, and frankly, it's just disgusting. That dent head is as bad with history as she is with science. We did start from inclusion, and issues began to arise, from the high school level all the way up to the Olympics. Fortunately, sports governing bodies seem to be figuring out what's happening. Trans female athletes want to compete with women because the gold at the end of the rainbow is a case full of trophies and medals. Rapinoe already secured her bag and isn't going to play soccer much longer. She likely won't have to worry about getting outplayed by a dude, so she doesn't care about undermining the system that made her successful if it makes her more money on her way out. The US women's national team might accept the science of this matter if they play serious games with men's pro teams. They're so disconnected from reality that the only time they'll touch grass is when the competition leaves them lying helplessly on it. This month, Balenciaga received backlash for objectifying children in its online ads. This PR crisis came about a month after the company ended its relationship with Kanye West due to his tweets. Let's see how Balenciaga went from making a major decision to cut ties to releasing ads inspired by QTs. Balenciaga's first campaign was a collaboration with Adidas. If you zoom in, you can see a page from the decision in US v. Williams. The brand claimed that it didn't want to be associated with the subject matter of that case. It would be like me promoting a new t-shirt by placing it on top of a copy of Cali Muscle's book, or worse yet, printouts of his old modeling portfolio. It's obvious that Balenciaga planned this ad down to the smallest detail. They can play the victim all they want, but all those fiddlers will get is the world's smallest violin. A spokesperson representing the photographer said that the company was well aware of how the finished ads would look. Everyone from Balenciaga was on the shoot and was present on every shot and worked on the edit of every image in post-production. That company knew what it was doing every step of the way. To think otherwise is nonsensical. Heavy on the nonce. The luxury brand's second campaign featured toddlers holding teddy bears with BDSM gear on, because nothing says glutton for punishment like paying thousands of dollars to look homeless. Other pictures in this campaign reference child sacrifices and contain demonic imagery. Balenciaga needs to paint its headquarters with blue and white stripes already. Of course the brand is to blame, but so are the parents of these models. I haven't seen money make anyone overlook a family member's inappropriate contact with a bear since Tony Soprano covered for Vito Spatafor. The photographer for this campaign said that it was part of a series called Toy Stories, which explores what people collect and receive as gifts. In my day, kids got their hands on Berenstain Bears, not Jeff Epstein Bears. Then they got 36 Chambers, because Wu-Tang is for the children. I'm not sure how many kids interact with Balenciaga's online platforms, but the toys and the child models were included to draw them in. The weirdos behind these campaigns are a bunch of rock spiders using the web to catch prey. Regarding the Adidas collaboration, the brand posted on Instagram, "We apologize for displaying unsettling documents in our campaign. We take this matter very seriously and are taking legal action against the parties responsible for creating the set and including unapproved items for our Spring 23 campaign photo shoot." Imagine making a fool of yourself because you didn't know what was on the camera. Good job, Balenciaga, you're basically DSP. Never be like DSP. On November 28, Balenciaga filed a $25 million lawsuit against the production company and the set designer in charge of the Adidas campaign. It alleges that members of the public, including the news media, have falsely and horrifically associated Balenciaga with the repulsive and deeply disturbing subject of the court decision. I think they're just passing the blame because the idea backfired. If I wanted to see brainlets in the fashion industry light themselves up, I'd rewatch Zoolander. Regarding the holiday gift guide, Balenciaga said, "We sincerely apologize for any offense our holiday campaign may have caused. Our plush bear bag should not have been featured with children in this campaign. We've immediately removed this campaign from all platforms. Sorry if you were offended by kids holding kinky teddy bears. What an apology." Also, Balenciaga always purges its social media pages before announcing drops. That doesn't change the fact that their photo shoots were the most repulsive events for awful parents to expose their kids to furry bags since Drag Queen Story Hour. Once again, the leadership at Balenciaga knew what they were doing, but decided that the reward would be worth the risk. Hardly any celebrities in the fashion world have said anything about these ads, because if they did, their next modeling gigs would be for Walmart, which also promotes brands that exploit kids. I understand that fashion brands have to attract attention, but there are far less traumatizing ways to do it. Whether or not you've already put your brand on the map, there's no good reason to put a map on your brand. Will Smith hasn't released an album in 17 years, but he can still make a hook that slaps. At the 94th Academy Awards, he walked on stage, smacked Chris Rock for making a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's appearance, then returned to his seat to curse Rock out. Let's watch how this rapper tried to turn the Academy Awards into the Source Awards.
Lord! Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right?
As you can see, Smith laughed at the joke, but he must have noticed Pinkett's facial expression. Normally, Will Smith doesn't do anything when another man makes his communal wife's eyes roll back into her head, but he took the joke as a shot at her alopecia, an autoimmune disorder that causes baldness. It's not like she's dying though, and she can afford a new hat and/or wig for every day of the year. There's no good reason to be so touchy over it, especially when she shaved her head to draw attention to her condition, and the fact that she found the one kind of entanglement that doesn't interest her.
That was a nice one, okay.
He's right. Comparing a bald woman to G.I. Jane, while obvious and not that funny, isn't insulting. She was a tough female character at a time when they weren't shoehorned into every movie to score points. Smith's chicken breast for a brain didn't consider this detail, and his temper went like Pinkett's hairstylist, straight to 11.
Oh, wow! Wow! Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth!
She belongs to the streets, bro. Just because she looks like an Academy Award doesn't make her a trophy wife.
Wow, dude!
Yes.
It was a G.I. Jane joke.
Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth!
I'm going to, okay?
You can tell by his tone that he's treating an adult like a child, which is strange because in Hollywood it's normally the other way around. It's amazing that one family could produce a hair-related hit single and a hair-related single hit. He sauntered away like a badass even though he was on the verge of tears. Meanwhile, after teasing the hair and catching a fade, Rock continued the show unfazed, which is impressive considering the size difference between them. That feel when Smith played Muhammad Ali, but his fighting style's a poor imitation from AliExpress. About an hour later, Smith accepted the Oscar for Best Performance by a Male Actor for his starring role in King Richard, shown here in an alternate timeline hooking up with other dudes' wives.
I'm being called on in my life to love people and to protect people and to be a river to my people.
Eroding a rock face doesn't make you a river. However, he is sending work upstream to his publicists and lawyers, aka Deadshot's career suicide squad.
In this business, you got to be able to have people disrespecting you.
Jada Pinkett's stony expression set it off, but based on her social media posts and talk show discussions, she doesn't mind her appearance. She just didn't think Chris Rock's joke was funny. When they say to give an unfunny comedian a hook on stage, this is not what they mean.
I want to be a vessel for love.
You mean love taps?
I want to apologize to the Academy. I want to apologize to all my fellow nominees.
The friend he just smacked? Anything to avoid a lawsuit, because no matter how much Smith spends on his legal team, paper won't beat Rock.
But love will make you do crazy things.
That's a common way to justify violence among domestic abusers and New York mob bosses. Instead of a joke about a 95-pound mole being removed from Johnny Sack's wife's ass, this conflict started with a joke about 95,000 hairs being removed from Will Smith's wife's scalp. Love makes you do crazy things, and when you're privileged enough to slap someone on national TV, then accept an award, love also don't cost a thing. I imagine Smith shifts the blame a lot on set. He'll let someone else take the fall and let someone named after the summer take his wife. Despite the attention from this incident, the Oscars still had the second lowest ratings ever. Chances are, not too many people will tune in just to catch Academy Awards antics next year. I'm no biologist, but if I wanted to see a grown man named Will act like a bitch, win prizes, and ruin events, I'd watch Ivy League women's swimming. Will Smith lived long enough to see himself become the villain, in this case the bowling alley bro who struck him for no reason. Every comedian is fine-tuning a bit about this incident and planning for future outbursts from Smith. Cancel culture and violent reactions can't kill comedy, because where there's a will, there's a way. An Illinois water park recently kept a 13-year-old girl from riding a water slide after weighing her and discovering that she was 5 pounds over the 200-pound limit. Her father, who's partially responsible for creating a leviathan like her in the first place, thinks that the routine procedure traumatized her. Let's hear from the man who understands safety guidelines about as poorly as he understands nutrition guidelines.
To have a company be responsible for such a massive mental impact on my daughter.
His daughter makes a massive physical impact, but that involves a different Illinois company.
Andrew Batten took his family to Raging Rivers Monday with hopes of getting on the water park's newest ride, the Mississippi Monster.
Based on childhood obesity stats, his daughter wouldn't be considered a monster in Mississippi, only on the Mississippi Monster.
Their excitement rippling into waves of embarrassment.
When Typhoon watched his daughter squall after hearing that she was too big of a water body.
After a worker asked his 13-year-old daughter to step on a scale in front of complete strangers. The weight limit for the ride, 200 pounds.
She steps on the scale and she's 205. I get the safety, but just communicate.
Every water slide has a sign that gives a ride's weight limit, and it's standard for guests to step on a scale, which also eliminates anyone who's too skinny for a ride. If manlets can stand under the dreaded height requirement sign at a roller coaster, then his daughter can step on a scale at a water slide. Besides, there were probably only a few dozen people in line, none of whom cared about or remembered how fat she was. Batten's daughter and a WNBA player draw the same size crowds, but have different problems with slamming buckets. The water park worker was just doing his job and telling the Battens what the scale read. It's not like he announced her weight to the world like her dick-brained dad did.
Batten taking his frustrations to Facebook in a post that's been shared more than 300 times, saying, quote, "To have to see my daughter's face, eyes welling up with tears as she was turned away for being 5 pounds over."
To no one's surprise, he even writes obese body paragraphs.
Raging Rivers tells me the new water tubes for the Mississippi Monster water slide will be here as soon as Wednesday. This will increase the weight capacity for the ride.
Even with the new tubes, that water slide still won't shoot as many obese women as the magazine industry.
The disappointment that she felt by not being able to ride the brand new ride was definitely overshadowed by the public humiliation of being asked to step on a scale, and then further than that, being told you're overweight.
And further than that, her story being told to news reporters. This is peak Streisand effect, unintentionally raising awareness of a unit overlooking the water.
Both say they don't plan on returning to the water park anytime soon.
Darcy doesn't blow. I'm sure it's because of the so-called embarrassment of being weighed, not because his daughter is incapable of losing a few pounds. Raging Rivers installed stronger tubes and battened down the hatches, while slop continues to go down the batten's hatches.
We, as parents, now have to, undo the emotional damage that this, corporate company cost us.
The employee who politely told Batten's daughter that she couldn't ride the water slide didn't do any emotional damage. The policy that he enforced prevented the physical damage of a butterball hurtling into tight corners and sudden drops, and maybe the structural damage of that chubber flying through a wall like Rasputia in Norbit. Parents who let their kids become obese are far more abusive than any scale readout or park policy, and cause far more damage to their kids' health. Whether or not you enjoy careening into pools, being obese puts you on the fast track to a hole in the ground.
Step right up here for the greatest show on earth, the Washed Up Loser Olympics 2022. The Russians couldn't carry their national flag because CrossFit doesn't recognize the regime. Instead, they're representing a regimen that makes it hard to recognize that you even left. No matter where they come from, CrossFitters stand united because
Working out like morons is their red flag. Giving you the latest on this invasion, I'm Asian reporter and returning champion Elgintensity, aka the law firm of Traplin, and McGriddle. And they're off. If you're watching this without context, then you're probably wondering if they're going to need those helmets for another part of the event, or if they're just speds. Yes.
To start this first 1 mile, then we got a wreck in the back.
That blonde really crashed and burned. Who does she think she is, Anne Heche? Fortunately, she'll just walk away with a scrape. Also, the men didn't have an impact in the rear that caused the rash. The world's dealing with enough of that as it is.
It's slightly uphill, very loose gravel pit. You want to be in a higher gear, which means you're going to get more distance per pedal stroke and more control of the bike itself.
You should pick a lower gear when you ride uphill. I don't expect Chase Ingram to understand the drivetrain of a bike when his brain is a trike.
What a great start for Danielle Brandon. I'm looking at her as one of my top athletes to look at.
He should have been looking at how many laps she completed. Adams averaged about 3 minutes and 20 seconds per lap and lapped Brandon at around 25.5 minutes. Brandon would have had to make up that lap in about 2 minutes. In addition to counting her laps short, someone at the finish line mistakenly let Brandon go.
Top tier strength athlete, sometimes there's a cost to that as far as balance in your fitness.
The irony of your take.
You have your hand near the handlebars, just grab the handlebars themselves.
If you're going to fall during a bike race, at least be on the bike. Good job, you're less coordinated than a 79-year-old man. Also, that pointless technique definitely would have saved her a few seconds after doing an extra lap. I am especially disappointed with this math performance. If I wanted to see a helmet head go as fast as possible without knowing when to stop, I'd watch Forrest Gump. Let's see if the men adhered to CrossFit's pillar of accuracy by counting to 5.
I believe we're just on the heels of the Tour de France finishing about a couple weeks ago.
Don't do it. Don't compare this amateur hour event to the Tour de France.
And in some sense, you see the CrossFit Games mimicking, different stages, different tests, big climbs, fast sprints, and it's really that, despite the number of events we may have over the course of the weekend, the extra event is the totality of the test itself.
Here's another similarity. You can see Trek bikes in the Tour and in the Games, which is like seeing the same brand of tennis balls at the US Open and the Weinstein trial. We now turn from skipping laps to skipping ropes.
They miss at 74. They have to start all the way over, back at 0. And the weirdest part about single unders...
And Toomey just tripped.
No.
That feel when she comes from the land of kangaroos but sucks at hopping.
Oh my goodness.
Does not move on.
She placed 23rd. The penalty for missing a single under late in her set was greater than the penalty for missing a 1-mile bike lap in Event 1. I haven't seen a more destructive single under 75 since Greg Glassman resigned.
25 double unders with the crossover. They do not need to be unbroken.
The judge no-repped that for no reason. She's about one no-rep away from asking to speak to the manager of the Volunteers. Most of them are still struggling. If I wanted to see people constantly get tripped up by crossovers, I'd watch the And One mixtape tour. Classic CrossFit Games, a movement that the competitors suck at doing and the judges suck at counting. The crisscross group struggled from the jump, but there are still many stages for them to perform their ass-backwards routines.
To quote the Terminator, run with me if you want to lift.
Unlike John Connor in Terminator 2, the new games director couldn't prevent a disastrous Judgment Day. It would have been worse if he didn't reschedule this running and lifting event due to rain. A lot of people would have slipped under their weights and brought new meaning to the downfall of the resistance.
And so when you put that in, it's like, hey, sprint a mile. They're going to be running cumulative faster than basically their mile PR. You got to keep that into account. How do you feel after a dead mile sprint? Well, just like that, dead.
You must be brain dead to compare a 600-meter run to a sprint. He can't possibly be this awful at making comparisons.
Efficiency on the dip is Gabby Magawa's all over the place. So he's going to swing the feet and use that backswing as momentum to help lock it out. It's a little different kip. This is more, I mean, if you wanted to call it a glide kip like we would see on a bar.
I guess he can. All kips are bad.
This is the pinnacle of the movement because it basically forces the athletes into an upside down reverse strict press position, and the athletes are unable to rest their head on the ground at the bottom of each rep.
There are much better ways to set this up. I'd prefer if they brought their heads down to bells. One ring for yes, none for no. This system worked for Hector Salamanca, and he was also willing to destroy his body just to beat someone.
And you see that midline, that real big hyperextension.
There's no way to tell if the call on the right was correct. All I know is that Gerard didn't finish. He was stuck facing the wall until the end of time like the cask of Amontillado.
For all my gamers out there, we're engaged in some Mortal Kombat. Test your might.
Except in CrossFit's version, the steel breaks you.
First rep, so you don't have to catch it in a power position and squat isolated.
Heinrich Happelainen just got buried by that barbell.
Based on his current path, his power position is grounded. To top it off, he failed to slide the bar over his stomach like Lizzo on a roller coaster.
And George are stepping up to the deadlift.
This is such a wide shot that I almost missed that imbecile dumping the bar and running away. With all its money, CrossFit recorded that ding-dong ditch worse than a ring cam.
And Alex Gazan.
Noble games, you mean immobile frame? That feel when your opponents are bolting down the lanes while you look like you're bolted to the lane.
The first three women to the barbell.
Barnhart had a reset at the bottom, and Spiegel just got spit out the back.
Between her lack of power and resemblance to a marionette, she's in a puppet state in more ways than one. Another year, another games, where Adams gets no-repped into oblivion and has to stare at the floor. When it comes to lift attempts, the kid's been missing so long that there should be an Amber Alert.
Women on the competition floor are going to get capped.
And snapped. Back nine, you mean cat spine? I don't mean feng shui when I say that her bar and column were not positioned for success. CrossFit's new games director didn't program the events as recklessly as his predecessor would have, but sustaining bodily harm, like bad form, is the norm in competitive exercise. The Will Smith and Chris Rock incident this year taught us that you shouldn't get hurt over a joke, unless the joke is that you do CrossFit, in which case getting hurt is the point.
0! Every once in a while we make some good friends. So I'd like to dedicate this next one to a good friend of mine, Elgin Moniz, aka Trappy Davis Jr. Everybody drugs their body sometime. Everybody tries the gear somehow. Something in my lips just told me my sometime was now.